Hello everyone! When making this insulated floor, I set two goals: to spend as little money and as little effort on it as possible, and I think I succeeded. For my incredibly low budget project, a house for $1,000, which I've been covering from the start on my YouTube channel, Pezni Yashi Koshyaka, I got a floor with the same record low cost as all the other components of this project. At the same time, I used modern and affordable insulation, adhesive mix, and reinforcing material, which will allow even a complete beginner to do this work in just a few days. All the components are extremely easy to find. The fertile layer had long ago been removed from the area of the first floor and used in the garden as intended. In its place, waste from fixing the construction flaws of our main house was stored. I started by spreading them evenly over the surface. Back in the years when those mistakes were made, I was young, naive, and didn't know things like you shouldn't build an open porch out of brick. But even following the backbreaking and material-consuming building codes couldn't ensure the long-term impermeability of our open balcony. Last year, I had to redo everything. And this Soviet-era wheelbarrow has been following me since I was about 14. Since my parents' house was renovated and the shed rebuilt, my peers played the electronic game Nu Pogodi Catching Eggs, while I was hauling sand from the nearest construction site. Maybe that's when I started gaining experience in economical construction methods, expanding the sandy base for the future floor. I even philosophized to myself, what if this old wheelbarrow is my cross to bear? It only left me for a short period of relative financial well-being, and now we're together again as one. More modern, prettier wheelbarrows couldn't outlast it. They fell long ago during the construction of our main house. The only thing that needs repair is the rotted front board, but for this job, it's actually more convenient without it. Now I understand the Cuban brothers better, who have long proven to everyone that even very old cars can be kept running indefinitely. And a cart is even easier. Yeah, this isn't the future I imagined when I watched Guests from the Future. Even after almost 4 decades having made it to this very future on my own, unfortunately, I still can't move sand with the power of my mind. I push away doubts about the bright prospects of humanity because ahead lies an exciting process full of experiments. In order for the sand particles to fill the space between the debris of dismantled screeds and bricks as much as possible, I decided to use the physical properties of tap water. If you speed up time a little, its work becomes very noticeable. The best tamping effect with water was achieved when I poured the sand under pressure. The shrinkage is visible to the naked eye. The jet easily washes away the layer of sand even to a depth of 20 centimeters and effortlessly reaches the construction debris, filling the space between them with sand. Without cutting corners, I thoroughly soaked the entire area. In the borrowed old 2-meter aluminum tool, whether it was a level or a straight edge, the bubble wasn't working, so I taped a short level with a working bubble on top with electrical tape. There were hot days, which are not typical for our Belarusian August, and the excess moisture left the sand pretty quickly. Instead of explaining how I leveled the surface, it's much easier to just show the whole process. Pay close attention to this technique. The video was filmed in nearly one take with minimal editing and a slight increase in speed. I managed to achieve a fairly acceptable surface level right before your eyes, without a laser level or any guides. There are many other ways to make a surface horizontally even. These methods are widely covered on YouTube. If my method doesn't work for you, you'll find a suitable one, but they're all more complex. I admit I'm doing this for the first time. Everything is within the boundaries, no matter how you look at it. The sand should have the right moisture level for the grains to stick together properly. All calculations have also been minimized. I didn't need a strictly specified height for the future floor. Maybe that's why leveling didn't take much time. There were short breaks during the work, and once I even had to moisten the sand. When everything goes this fast, I'm not used to it, so I also decided to use the good old manual tamper. I make notches on it after compacting each object. It would take more time to rent a mechanical one, and time is money. After pouring the sand and leveling it, the top layer got redistributed, so extra compacting definitely won't hurt. I lift it up and put it down. It's very simple. The more often I do this, the less time it takes, and the faster the work goes. Next, I do the final leveling by cutting off the bumps sticking out on the surface. I returned the excess sand to the sand pile. There are almost no marks left on the sand, which means everything is fine. And the hardest part is behind us. The level is still fine, only light and satisfying work remains. Since I'm building the floor of a house, not a shed, I needed insulation. I brought all the insulation for the entire first floor in one trip. I also bought 2 cans of polyurethane adhesive foam and a medium-sized roll of alkali-resistant plaster fiberglass mesh. I'll be using extruded polystyrene foam, universal Penaplex Comfort with a thickness of 3 centimeters. I recommend that careful homeowners follow the standards and regulations and use thicker polystyrene foam. I made an economical decision, but it's important to consider the region where the insulation will be used and to properly calculate the thickness based on your specific conditions. For insulating floors like these, people usually use more durable Penaplex Foundation or even stronger Penaplex Extreme. Using Penaplex Comfort for these purposes is at our own risk. To implement the intended technology, I roughen one side of all the sheets. I've learned from experience that it's best to do this ahead of time in a comfortable working position. And my experience is that when I was redoing the floor and waterproofing the balcony of our main house last year, I also used Penaplex. Back then, I glued the sheets together into a large blank. I cut it into pieces that were easy to carry and shaped them to fit the balcony floor. Then, using an adhesive mixture for gluing and plastering insulation materials and fiberglass mesh, I applied a base reinforcing layer. After waiting for the surface to set, I flipped the blanks over and did the same on the other side. I then repeated the layer application once more. This way, I got a strong composite material with a core made of Penaplex. I also cut joists from it, which are meant to provide a slope to the balcony floor surface for reliable water drainage. I've been criticized for living in a reliable house while building a different one that's supposedly unreliable. That's true. As someone who has stepped on the rake of expensive construction and hasn't come to terms with it, I'm now trying to change everything. If what I have in mind works out, humanity will spend dozens of times less money and labor on construction. By fixing my balcony, I tested the viability of laying a cheap floor, such as in budget frame structures. The balcony floor rests on improvised joists. For this experiment, I waterproofed using the latest feng shui techniques. I used porcelain stoneware on top, and it's been effective for a year. I'm often asked if it's possible to use homemade tiles like the ones I laid on the balcony for flooring inside the house. Yes, you can, but in this case it's much simpler since we're making the floor of the first floor. High tile strength is unnecessary here. For support, we don't have narrow joists, but a carefully compacted surface. This is a type of ground floor. My friend, 15 years ago when he was building his house, wanted to lay Penaplex directly on the ground. But the hired builders thought he was crazy for that, and their incompetent authority prevailed at the time. The last sheet in the row is trimmed like this. No, like this. First, you need to flip it over, so take 2. We had to do a more expensive and labor-intensive rough and finish screed. Now that's right, we start the next row with the remaining part of the sheet. Laying Penaplex directly on sand is not just made up, it's an actual approved construction technology. In Russia, earthen floors were common in huts for centuries. Saws and sawmills only became widespread due to the efforts of Pyotr I. He issued a decree to teach woodcutters how to saw firewood. However, this only impacted landowners' houses at the time. Peasant huts had earth floors where leveled ground was trampled down until the 20th century. We cut off the excess foam. The top layer was coated with clay mixed with horse manure, which provided hardness. In Belarusian and Ukrainian huts, earthen floors were still present in the mid-20th century. Since most of us have peasant roots, before urbanization a century ago, 90% of people lived rurally. And thanks to the revolution, there are no descendants of landowners among us. Our genetic memory should be very receptive to this kind of floor. Moreover, instead of horse manure, I used more advanced mixtures. This trick doesn't always work. I roughed up the second half of the foam board. As you probably noticed, I'm not laying down a waterproofing film. Foam board doesn't absorb moisture and therefore it doesn't let it through. And additional waterproofing and vapor barriers are not required. But before pouring the screed, it's best to tape the seams. In my case, the top layer is rough, so the tape might not stick, and I used a waterproofing compound instead. And if you now pour a 5cm cement sand screed on top and reinforce it with a welded mesh made of steel rod, you'll get a completely standard, technologist-approved method for ground floors. The previous day, we went on a short trip and rafted down a rapid river. Everyone was engrossed in the competition, and by the time the young sailor and another person noticed the dangerous rapid ahead, it was too late. The helmsman missed it, our raft was thrown onto the rocks, and half the crew, including me, ended up overboard. I didn't have time to brace myself and hit my knee on an underwater rock. Oh, a campfire, now we can warm up.
And I'm going after the mist, after dreams and the scent of the tiger. And I'm going after the mist, after dreams and the scent of the tiger.
Upon returning to my homeland, my knee swelled up and hurt a lot. That's why I decided not to pour the labor-intensive screed. The construction must continue, so a less labor-intensive option for the next steps was unanimously chosen. Yes, and I was immediately confident in the method I used next, relying on my intuition as a structural analyst. Keep in mind that if the screed is laid over a rough screed and the polystyrene sheets are not joined well, the mortar will seep through, creating stress bridges, and the top screed may crack. According to traditional construction science, I would need to mix 1.2 cubic meters of mortar for my floor area, which is manageable but not effortless. The mesh won't add much strength to such a slab. It's needed to prevent the screed from cracking during shrinkage. In my case, perimeter damping pads aren't needed. Their function is performed by the extruded polystyrene foam of the permanent foundation formwork. Even a person with slightly limited mobility can make this kind of floor, tested and proven. There are fiberglass meshes specifically for screeds. There are basalt meshes for screeds, but I use good old plaster fiberglass mesh. Because you apply thin layers of the mixture, it's almost impossible to make serious mistakes in thickness, so no beacons are needed. It seems I finally figured out the proper way to use a notched trowel. And it's rewarding work because with very little effort, you get a very noticeable result. While spending over 3 hours in line to see the surgeon during my knee rehabilitation, soaking up the mixed, indescribable emotions of the waiting room, I completely forgot what was actually bothering me. And in our Gomel clinic, I got an even more unforgettable impression than from rafting down a northern rapid river. Q therapy works. But during those hours, my nostalgia for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was fading away. I recalled spending half a day queuing for Lidsky slippers and around 5 hours for 6 Sony audio cassettes. They didn't give me more in one pair of hands. And maybe I even showed some moral weakness by coming to the conclusion that it's better to be rich and healthy than poor and sick. For that, I wouldn't have been understood in a socialist society. When the first layer sets, I apply the second one, laying the mesh perpendicular. The thin layers allow the structure to heat up quickly in cold weather, which is convenient for places like country houses that aren't constantly heated. When you arrive for a weekend in winter, you don't have to wait half a day for the temperature to reach a comfortable level. Our outdoor shower, built using similar technology, instantly warms up from the hot water flow. Nearly 25 square meters of first floor space cost $1,000. It only took 8 25-kilogram bags of the mix, which by weight is more than 10 times lighter than a 5-centimeter screed. Without the Germans, we can't even mix sand and cement properly. It's likely due to Peter I. He made us accustomed to foreign experts. And with a 5-centimeter cement sand screed, just for the cement alone, it would take about 20 to 25 kilogram bags. The success of the whole project was ensured by simply leveling the compacted sand. The surface immediately becomes suitable for applying the final coating. I'm not afraid of being laughed at by couch builder theorists, because now I'm a practitioner. To make sure this method works, you need to walk on this kind of floor. I'm planning to make the final floor covering myself, and it will also be super cheap. I'm still thinking about it. I laid out the tiles just to make sure that the surface is level enough. May peace prevail worldwide. Thanks.